from rejected beta to a cold and calculating Chad. That's what our protagonist this time became after so many rejections. He trained his body and mind to never be rejected again, but a girl appeared to change that. Without further delay, let's get into the recap. After being rejected repeatedly while he was still in middle school, our protagonist began to isolate himself and even created an imaginary friend called Jason. And as his first piece of advice, he told him to try imagining that all girls were stones. That way, he began to train his mind for this over many years, and now he is surrounded by stone girls no matter where he looks. Perhaps because he seems so uninterested in them, he always ends up being asked out. However, because of the appearance he gave them in his mind, he simply has no interest and can reject them all with ease. Even greetings, which he once had difficulty doing naturally, have become extremely easy. After all, talking to a stone without feeling anything isn't difficult. And summoning his imaginary friend to ask if he agrees, he appears and says yes, but that he also doesn't care about those dating things. And already on his way home, he ends up dropping his phone without noticing and is called by a female voice. But something was wrong, because this one, unlike the others, looked nothing like a stone, but rather like a goddess. And with the phone in her hands, she asks if it was his. Seeing such beauty and no longer those ugly stones catches him completely by surprise. Why didn't she look like a stone like the others? He hasn't seen a girl's face in a long time, especially a beauty like this. All this time he had been silent, so the girl asks why he isn't answering. However, when he opens his mouth to answer her, he ends up saying that she is really very beautiful. This catches her completely by surprise, and she thanks him without thinking, but he simply takes his phone and runs away while thanking her for finding his phone. And already outside the school, he now runs even faster while wondering what he just said. And he can already imagine the rumors that might come from this. And already at home, his friend Jason says that he was very sweet earlier. However, our boy was not in the mood for jokes, which makes Jason tell him not to blame himself so much. And stopping to think about it better now, he wonders why that beauty didn't look like a stone, and Jason also doesn't know why. Sunk in doubts, he already begins to think that there are high chances of rumors about this spreading, and that the kind of situation that traumatized him so much might end up coming back. Seeing that he was starting to sink into his doubts, Jason wakes him up by giving him a knock on the head. He tells him that instead of wasting time thinking nonsense, he should use that time to think of a plan for what is to come. And besides that, the school is big. He shouldn't run into the girl easily. With that decided, time passes and he goes to school the next day. And going against his plans, the beauty from the previous day appears and greets him, also asking if he isn't going to run like yesterday. Completely caught off guard, he now wonders what to do, while Jason tells him to calm down and act naturally. The stone girl then asks who that boy was to the beauty, and she simply says that he was the guy who called her beautiful the day before. And making a seductive pose, she asks him if by any chance she was beautiful today as well. And yes, my loyalty, you are beautiful like the day. That was enough to paralyze him for a moment. And taking advantage of them laughing, he quickly ran away at full speed. Escape successfully executed. For him, they were laughing at him and might even think he is in love with her. He wants to avoid misunderstandings as much as possible. Little does he know that it wasn't anything like that. He had even thought he wouldn't meet her. But there she was again, surrounded by stones. She also notices him and tries to talk to him, but he quickly walks away, ignoring her. This happens again, and she was already starting to look irritated. Now, on the way home, he was thinking of a new plan, when suddenly the beauty from before appears again, looking not happy at all, and completely scaring him. Once again there she was in front of him, and he wondered why this kept happening so many times. But before he could think about running again, the girl confronts him, saying that she tried to say hi to him several times, and he always ran away and asks if she did something wrong, that he was acting very strangely. And there was the boy again in a misunderstanding, and he quickly tries to think of an excuse as the reason. However, what comes out of his mouth is the truth, and he says that all the other girls look like stones to him, except her. A silence forms because of that, and he now asks Jason if he said something stupid. The girl then notices that his hand was trembling and that he seemed really very nervous. In that way, seeming to understand the whole situation. She smiles, a beautiful smile by the way. And then she approaches the boy and asks his name, which is Park Jin-young, which I believe I hadn't said until now. And already close enough, she asks if by any chance he knows that what he said was flirting on his part. Only then does he realize, and soon remembers the first and second rule that his friend Jason had told him. Treat women like stones, and don't create expectations. He has just completely failed at both. Already at home, he begins to imagine his entire future with her. Marriage, children, arguments with the children, and also his final moments. But trying to save him from those illusions, Jason hits him with the punch of reality, because that was only the first real girl he had seen in 5 years. And back to his senses, he now realizes that he can't keep ignoring her anymore. Because of that, Jason advises him to have an objective in mind. When he sees the stone girls, he stops feeling anything, and because of that he manages to stay calm and composed. But now that this girl who doesn't look like a stone suddenly appeared, the effects of seeing all girls as stones must have disappeared. And especially for him, who has zero immunity to female faces after only seeing stones all this time, things are going to become very complicated. And the only thing he can do now is try to look cool when he is near her. The next day, already at school, now he stared at her, who didn't understand, and noticing that her friend tries to warn her about it, but she had already noticed for some time. He was looking like that because he couldn't see well and asks Jason what the new plan was again. He explains that it is basically to desensitize himself, so he just has to look at her, that he should try to smile. In doing so, things only get worse, because it makes her even more confused. Her friend again tries to warn her about it, and that he was smiling at her. With that, even Jason was starting to feel uncomfortable, so he decides to stop for today before causing misunderstandings. Noticing this, she takes the chance to ask her friend if she knew him, and she says that it's obvious, because he is quite famous with the girls. That several girls have already tried to talk to him, but he doesn't seem to have any interest in them. Ironically, the girls think this attitude of his is super cool. And curious about her doubt, her friend asks if she was interested in him, but she says that wasn't it. And remembering the previous day, she says that there's only something bothering her a little. And already in the classroom, he comments to Jason that this doesn't seem like a good plan, because he would need to keep looking at her and trying to calm himself down, and for that he would also need to follow her around. That would look very much like something a stalker would do, and he doesn't want to look even stranger, and Jason agrees. Jin-young then wonders if a photo wouldn't be better than staring at her in person. Maybe he should look for her on Instagram? No, Jason suggests something better. Go there personally and ask for her Instagram. And doing it in a supernatural and calm way, he asks for her Instagram, and after staring at him for a few seconds, she agrees, seeming to have some ideas in mind. Then she asks him to open the app and asks for his phone to search. And opening his profile, she notices that it seemed new and asks if he had just created that account, and he says yes. He didn't have social media, so he quickly made one for his plan. And upon learning that he had just created the account, she can't help but laugh, because it was way too obvious that he had barely created the account and came straight to her. And only then does he realize that he literally did that. And because of that, she bursts out laughing. He was so focused on his objective that he forgot to think more before acting. He tries to come up with excuses to say, but it doesn't help anymore. Already satisfied, she says that it was fine, but asks if he also didn't want to know her phone number. That leaves him even more shocked, but before he could answer, she says she was just joking, and that his reaction was funny. And returning his phone, she says she is already following him on Instagram, and before leaving, tells him to leave plenty of likes on her posts. Now alone, the movie of his life with her appears in his mind again, but Jason brings him back to reality. Later that night, she was lying in bed using her phone when she saw that he had posted a photo, and before going to sleep, she left a like on his photo. Just like you all are going to do on this video, right? Right? Anyway, on another day, Si-in-woo was now telling her friend what had happened, who could hardly believe it, that he even created an account just to follow her and everything. But there is still something she is unsure about, which is him not having shown interest in other girls before. And her friend confirms that yes, it's true, that he only acts that way with her. Coincidentally, he passes in front of their classroom at that moment. And to show that she was telling the truth, her friend runs out of the classroom alone and shouts, calling his attention. She pretends that she fell, and looks at him asking for help, also saying that it would be very kind if Jin-young came to help. And while to us, she looks beautiful, to him, she is literally this. Because of that, he goes to her and lifts her up with zero interest, and then leaves without saying anything. This makes Si-in-woo burst out laughing, but agree that at least she was right in the end. And without realizing it, Jin-young made an enemy. And heading toward the school exit, Jin-young looked attentively at his phone, because it was his daily exercise to look at her until he got used to it. And Jason raises the question again of only her not looking like a stone. But before he could form his theories, he runs into Si-in-woo at the school gate, and she notices him right away as well, which already leaves him completely awkward. Jin-young then asks why she was standing there, and she says that she needed to take the bus, but forgot her money at home. Curious if she lives far away, he asks, and she says that she actually lives quite close to there, which makes him ask why she doesn't just walk, since it's really close. But she says it's not that simple, and when questioned about it, she hesitates a little, but reveals that she has chronic anemia. Upon hearing that, he quickly takes all the money from his wallet to give it to her, but she refuses and says that it seems like she was robbing him, and then suggests that he should just accompany her to her house. Already walking, she talks and talks even more, but he couldn't hear a single word she was saying. This was very sudden. He never expected to walk home together like this. But that also makes him remember that something like this already happened before. He was accompanying a friend and talking naturally when some boys started spreading that they were dating, which made the girl deny it and say that she would never go out with someone like him. After that day, she never walked with him again. Because of that, the current situation is somewhat uncomfortable. And without noticing that she had fallen, he kept walking until she starts making a fuss, and he finally notices her on the ground. Worried, he runs to her and asks if she tripped on something, but she says it was just the slope and reminds him about her anemia. She then asks for help to get up, and he lifts her by holding her hand with the maximum care possible. And the way he looks at her hand, I doubt he will wash it today. She then notices that he held her hand, while when lifting her friend earlier, he didn't care to do so. Remembering that makes her laugh, and she comments about what he did earlier. But he didn't even remember what she was talking about. And since she was already close to home, she says that she will continue alone and thanks him for accompanying her home. Now alone, he could finally breathe properly now and hopes that this won't happen again tomorrow. Today it happened that she forgot the money, but tomorrow things will return to normal and he will be able to stop his hyperactive imagination. However, she seems to have forgotten something and calls him again. She informs him that it will take some time until she receives her allowance, so she asks if she can count on him again tomorrow. This while she could barely catch her breath after running to. He tries to repeat to himself that he only wanted this to end quickly, but on the outside he is happier than ever because of it. But when he looks at her again, she was on the ground dizzy again. Already at home, on the morning of the next day, Jason tries to tell his theory about why only Si-in-woo doesn't look like a stone. And he explains to, hearing that surprises him, even though it seemed obvious that it was that from the beginning. He asks if it could really be that, but Jason says he can't think of anything else besides that. And grabbing his backpack, he says they can talk better another time. And leaving the room, his father asks if he was already going to school. He greets him in a formal manner, and his father asks if he already had breakfast, but he says no because he wasn't hungry. He says that his mother made something good and warns that he will arrive late today, that he should eat before leaving. And so we quickly notice that the situation at home is not the best. Now, at school, he tells Jason that if his theory is correct, they were truly united by destiny, and that he hopes it is wrong. He is then suddenly called, and when he turns around, this time it was Si-in-woo's friend. And she simply says that she is going to hurt him, which leaves him not understanding anything. She says that she practiced low kicks all night, just so she could injure him, but he didn't even know who she was. She says she has never been so humiliated in her life, and that she will never forgive him. But she will be generous and will only give him 3 kicks. He tries to ask why all of this is happening, but she calls him 4 eyes and throws the first kick, which he dodges by reflex. Without understanding anything, he simply starts running, but she soon warns him that she is very fast, and that unlike Si-in-woo, she doesn't have anemia. And don't get confused, he wasn't seeing her as beautiful, but rather in that stone form as always, which looked frightening. He simply didn't know how he ended up in this situation. And without giving him time to think, She quickly catches up to him and prepares her kick, when suddenly Sienwu appears around the corner, and she is the one who takes the kick straight in the shin, falling immediately. Seeing that, he becomes worried and returns, but ends up slipping and falls face first on the ground. With that, she managed to get 2 victims at the same time, but she wasn't happy about it at all, and could only apologize. Because of that, both of them ended up in the infirmary, and Sienwu says that her friend has always been a bit strange like that. Regardless of the reason, there he was alone with Sienwu again. He even tries to resort to Jason, but he tells him to deal with this alone. He just needs to not say anything stupid. And starting a conversation first, Sienwu asks if he knew what there was to eat in the cafeteria, and he says it was fried yellow corvina, a popular food in Korea, which makes her excited. She then asks if he eats breakfast before coming to school, and he says that he usually always skips breakfast, that his father is always at home in the morning, and that he finds it strange to be there with him. She listens attentively, and then says that he should try to spend more time with his father. And while they were talking, he remembers the first day he saw her and what he said. He thought he had said that because he hadn't seen a girl's face in a long time. But looking at her now, he realizes that she is really very, very beautiful. And as if reading the mind of all of us, she asks if she is really that beautiful. He tries to pretend that he wasn't thinking about that, but his exaggerated reaction only makes her laugh. And then she says that he is really very fond to tease. And while he was still completely embarrassed, she says that whenever he panics, he ends up saying strange things. He tries to apologize for that, but she says he doesn't need to. After all, he's quite cute. He simply didn't know what to say or how to react anymore. And then he remembers Jason's theory, which is that Jin-young simply fell in love at first sight. And then they stay a little longer recovering and talking. Moments later, it was time for her friend to receive a lesson. Sienwu then warms up and says that she has to take responsibility for what she did. And without wasting time, she throws a kick, which ends up hitting both her friend and Jin-young. At that moment, he only wondered how he ended up in this. Now, in a strange place, Jin-young says that he fell in love at first sight with Sienwu. She, however, says that just because she was a little kind to him, he already started fantasizing, and that she would never date a pathetic loser like him. Fortunately, he was only having a nightmare. He then explains his nightmare to Jason, and that it started when Jason told him his theory about what he feels for Sienwu being love at first sight. He then says that if that theory is true, what he feels is a one-sided love, which indicates that what he has been feeling these days is genuine fear. And as a brilliant piece of advice, Jason says that if he knows himself and knows his enemy, he has great chances of winning. He basically tells him to try to learn more about Sienwu, and that way he realizes that he really doesn't know much about her, and that this really is a good strategy. With that in mind, he decides to go to her classroom, and even nervous, he follows his plan and looks for her, but he doesn't see her anywhere. Suddenly someone calls him and says that he was standing in front of the place where he sits. Looking at such a figure, he just steps aside, but the chubby guy doesn't seem grateful at all. Such audacity makes Jason say that he would love to try punching him. Jin-young ignores Jason's thoughts and asks if the chubby guy saw Sienwu, and that he heard that her seat was right there. And not in a good mood at all, the chubby guy says that he has seen this movie before. Kids like him always fall in love with that kind of girl. That makes Jin-young start to get irritated, and Jason was already preparing for battle. While asking the same question again, Jin-young almost ends up losing his temper, and without caring, the chubby guy just says that he wouldn't know where girls like her are. Already at his limit, Jin-young asks the chubby guy not to talk nonsense about Sienwu, but the chubby guy just says that he is really in love. In that way, Jin-young asks him to wait a moment because he had something to give him. The chubby guy then prepares himself, and what he receives are Jin-young's jacket attacks. And while he was hitting the chubby guy, Sienwu appears to see what he was doing. And out of control, he says that that pig was insulting Sienwu, so he was hitting him for her. She then says that he can't continue, because he always treats her like that. Curious, Jin-young asks the reason for that, and she says that they have known each other since childhood. In other words, that was her childhood friend. Moments later, he now apologizes for hitting him, but the chubby guy says it was fine and that it didn't hurt at all. Jin-young then asks if he really was Sienwu's friend since they were little, and he says yes, since they were about 3 years old. This was the perfect opportunity for him to put his plan into practice. However, the chubby guy soon destroys his hopes and says that he should give up if he wants something with Sienwa. He warns that she is extremely popular and that there is basically a truckload of guys after her, and that none of them have managed anything so far. He had already noticed that she was popular, mainly because of the number of followers she has on Instagram. And not giving up, Jin Young says that maybe none of them were her type, and the chubby guy agrees. That is possible. But that wasn't the reason he told him to give up. He then says that they have known each other since they were little, and they always studied at the same school, so they spent a lot of time together. However, on a random day, when he wanted to talk to her, so they could go eat something, she seemed like a completely different person. She was smiling like always, but she still didn't seem like the same person. Something was missing. Even nowadays, he still feels the same thing about her. Because of that, he told him to give up. On the way back to the classroom, he wonders what that feeling was that the chubby guy mentioned, and that he never felt anything like that. But it must be nothing, since it is only the chubby guy's personal opinion. Suddenly, Sienwa and her friend run into them, and Sienwa asks if they had somehow become close and where they were going. Jin Young didn't know what to say, but he knew he shouldn't say that they were talking about her. However, the chubby guy didn't think the same, and says that they were talking badly about her behind her back, putting Jin Young in serious trouble. She asks if that was really true, but it wasn't like that. The chubby guy again says more nonsense, but this time he is again met with attacks to make him stay quiet, and Jason even offers a better attack option. And while the two were fighting and Sienwa wondered what they were doing, her friend says to leave them alone with their stupidity. But she seems really curious about what was said earlier. Moments later, Jin Young was going home while thinking about the nonsense the chubby guy said, and that it will only create more misunderstandings. And catching up to Jin Young, Sienwa calls him and asks if he was having fun talking behind her back earlier. Once again, he is caught by surprise, but a good surprise, because Sienwa is always wonderful. My words, by the way. Jin Young then tries to explain himself, saying that he wasn't speaking badly about her, and she says she knows that it was surely a misunderstanding from the chubby guy, and that he always does that. But leaving that aside, they should walk to her house as usual. And just thinking about the uphill that was coming already stressed her out. Now, there was no more way to avoid talking about what happened earlier. But for now, it's better not to mention that they were talking about her. And already in front of Sienwa's mortal enemy, the uphill, Jin Young asks if it is really that hard to climb it, and she says that it's obvious. But the main symptom of anemia is weakness and fatigue, which is why climbing stairs or hills is quite difficult. Because of that, she had the brilliant idea of him pushing her from behind while going up. He asks if she's serious, but she simply asks if he doesn't want her to make it home. Having nowhere to run, he starts pushing, and they indeed climb much faster. However, she says it tickles, and that she might be a little sensitive when someone touches her back. She always comes with these jokes in moments like this, and that quickly makes him imagine what would happen if he were closer to her. That instead of pushing her like this, he carried her on his back. Maybe someday that could happen, but he still wonders if that's dreaming too high. And because of that, he ends up forgetting what he was doing and pushing her too fast. He apologizes, but she could barely catch her breath to answer. That's when he notices the beautiful scenery in front of them. That was a really beautiful view. And only then Sienwa notices the scenery as well, and says she didn't know this place. That this place is very high compared to where she lives, to simply come up here. And she says that now she is exhausted and still has to walk all the way home because of him. But even so, she is grateful that he showed this place to her. And seeing her at that moment in that beautiful scenery makes him remember what the chubby guy had said about her giving off something strange. He may not know everything about her yet, but at that moment she is the only one he can see. Because of that, he calls her and says he wants to talk about what he said with the chubby guy. She asks if he really did speak badly about her behind her back, but he says no, but that he ended up discovering that she was friends with Jumin, the chubby guy, and because of that he realized he wants to know more about her. She gets surprised, and he says that because of that it must have looked like they were talking badly about her behind her back, that he just didn't want her to misunderstand. She stays quiet thinking for a moment, then says that he doesn't need to worry about those things, and that she had already forgotten about it. They then go down the hill, and she decides to continue the rest of the way alone, and thanks him for accompanying her again today. Now alone again, he can finally breathe deeply. Jason then appears, and says that her reaction was very hard to read, and wonders if he really should have been that honest. Even knowing that he wanted to be honest with her, sometimes it might be better to just stay quiet and let things flow. And he also wonders what she really thinks. And already far enough away from him, she remembers what he said earlier and comments that he sometimes simply attacks like that while seeming excited. But after walking a bit more, she suddenly trips and falls. The next day, now it was the day of physical education, and Jason comments that sweating a lot makes him more of a man. He then notices that his shoelace was untied and bends down to fix it, when suddenly another beautiful woman appears and asks who told him to bend down right in the middle of the path. She says she almost tripped over him and could have gotten hurt, and asks if he wanted that. She is one of the teachers at the school, and because he is looking at her from below like that, she says he shouldn't do that. He asks why, but she only says that it is something ugly to do, and that girls really hate that. And still holding his head down, she says it is also very embarrassing. And my friend, what a gorgeous woman that is. And while leaving, she warns him not to stop in the middle of the path like that again. However, no matter how beautiful she was, to him she looked like just another stone woman. Out of fear of being rejected, he began to see all girls as stones. He needed to make sure he would never be rejected by anyone again. And for that, he needed to improve himself. So naturally, he focused on his self-development in general. As a result of that, he has great aptitude for sports, and he is famous even for that. And walking around the school, Seonwoo and her friend notice that the boys were playing ball, and then they see some girls cheering for Jin Young, saying that he is cool, that even though he doesn't show interest in them, that is part of his charm. Seonwoo listens quietly, while her friend makes it clear how surprised she is to know that he has so many cringe fangirls. She then asks the reason why he is really so popular for girls to call him cool and everything, and that they must be exaggerating a bit. And thinking about that, Seonwoo begins to remember his expressions and reactions, and she says she agrees with her friend. The game then ends and Jin Young's team ends up winning. He then leaves to go wash his face, and the chubby guy follows him, clearly jealous of all the attention he gets. Jin Young even tries to say that he played well too, but he says he is offended. Then he redirects the water from the faucet and throws it on Jin Young, and so they start throwing water at each other. The girls who were passing nearby then begin to hear the two of them and decide to go see what was happening. The big guy then begins to prepare for battle, and Jin Young does the same. But before they start, the girls appear, and they are completely wide-eyed at Jin Young's well-built physique, but when they see the big guy's physique, they're completely disgusted. And after witnessing such a satanic sight, the two girls quickly leave in disgust. And because of their reaction after seeing his body, the fat guy also became upset. However, the one who got the most upset there was Jin Young after Sunwoo saw him shirtless. And because of that, he took out his anger on the fat guy, the one responsible for it. And even after already walking away, the girls could still hear the two arguing, while Sunwoo seemed interested in what she saw. The next day, they were playing soccer again, but this time the fat guy managed to stop the ball kicked by Jin Young, who didn't seem to be doing very well. The fat guy laughed, and even the crowd watching was impressed. And provoking him, he asked what's wrong with Jin Young, because today his kick was horrible. Jason notices it too, and says that he really doesn't seem well. Because of that, he decides to go rest for now. And while sitting down, he accidentally lets out a sigh. And coincidentally, Sunwoo was nearby, and says that he looked tired. And looking at her from below like this, he ends up realizing something and asks her to come down to where he was. With that, he confirms what the teacher had said before, but he hadn't noticed it with her because she seemed like a rock. That looking at Sunwoo from this angle is really embarrassing. And now sitting beside him, she asks why he's reacting like that and why he doesn't want to look at her face. And with no excuses to give, he says that the teacher had commented that people look ugly when viewed from below and that girls hate being seen that way. Knowing that, Sunwoo then asks if she looked ugly from that angle, but Jin Young says no. And that actually, she looked wonderfully beautiful, even when seen from below. He ends up letting that slip out, but Sunwoo liked his honesty. Only afterward does he realize what he said, and Jason immediately notices that he completely fell in her trap, but that it was a great compliment. Jin Young then asks what he should do now, but brushing it off, Jason simply tells him to figure it out himself. And still not knowing what to say after telling her that, he just curses his honest mouth. And maybe because she realized he was lost on what to say, Sunwoo seems to think of something and then thanks him for the compliment. and that hearing him say those things to her makes her feel really good. That besides, compliments are always nice to hear. And not knowing what to say, he simply agrees. But Sunwoo continues and comments that she hears girls complimenting him all the time too, like saying he's cool and sexy, among other things. And apparently he didn't even know that, because he goes into shock and says that he's nothing like that. However, Sunwoo simply asks if he really isn't, and that actually she doesn't think the girls are wrong, catching him by surprise. But curious, he asks which part of the compliments Sunwoo thinks is true. With that, she remembers what she saw the previous day. And moving closer to him, she says that she agrees with pretty much all of them, which leaves both him, and even her, embarrassed. The mood was perfect, and Jin-young was about to say something when one of his teammates calls him to go back to playing. But before he leaves, Sunwoo calls out to him and tells him to come back with the victory, because he can definitely do it. Hearing that awakens something inside him for a moment, and then he returns to the soccer field. He wasn't feeling well during the first half, but now his body strangely feels great, and he asks Jason if he knows the reason why. However, Jason only says that he should already know the answer, that it's definitely because she's watching him play. With that in mind, Jason says that he had been avoiding saying this, because it would go against the advice he initially gave him. But maybe these small bursts of happiness he just received aren't such a bad thing to chase after. And after that, he scores an amazing goal, easily becoming the MVP of the match. And watching everything closely, Sunwoo can't help but smile happily. And then we're shown that, at the moment Jin-young said that Sunwoo was wonderfully beautiful, the teacher was passing by there and noticed that he seemed extremely happy and capable. The next day, Jin-young was leaving to go to school when he found his parents arguing about something. His mother had given some tickets to his father, but he said he didn't want them because he would be working. And noticing Jin-young, his mother walks up to him, asks if he's already heading to school and if he isn't hungry. But he just says that he'll buy something on the way. The truth is that he is hungry, but he thinks eating with his father would be a little awkward. The reason? We don't know. But knowing that he wasn't going to sit down and eat with them, his mother says that the neighbor gave her these 2 tickets and asks if he would like to use them. He asks what they're for, and she informs him that they are for a theater play next week, and says that he should invite a friend. She explains that she was going to give them to his father, but apparently he has to work that day, right when she thought she would finally go out with him after a while. And with the tickets in hand, he wonders who he should invite to go with him. He tries inviting Extra A, but he refused because he had something else to do that day. And the same thing happens when he tries inviting Extra B. And going to the fat guy as a third option, to his surprise, he also refuses because he says he doesn't like those kinds of things. With that, Jin-young notices that the fat guy really must not like that stuff and comments that he probably likes anime instead, right? However, he says that he doesn't watch anime either and then leaves because he had to go to the snack bar. Now alone, he wonders why he assumed the fat guy watched anime, and Jason says that it's probably because of stereotypes. But now he wonders who he should invite, and that makes Jason tell him to be honest, that he definitely wants to invite Sunwoo to go with him. And passing by the teacher without even looking at her, he just keeps talking with Jason, who says that he was clearly avoiding inviting Sunwoo out of fear, and that now seems like the right moment to make a decision. And noticing that Jin-young really seemed to be completely ignoring her, the teacher asks if he's not even going to say hi to her. Only then does he notice her, and says that he hadn't seen her, and she noticed that because he was walking around talking to himself. And reading him completely, she asks if he happens to be the type of person who creates imaginary friends and talks to them, which makes him wonder if she knows the truth. And sitting on a bench, Jin-young explains everything to the teacher about wanting to invite a girl to the theater. And hitting the mark once again, she says that Sunwoo really is very popular. He asks how she knows it was Sunwoo. And teasing him, she says that she overheard while passing by the field yesterday something about him calling her wonderfully beautiful, even when viewed from below. But putting that aside, she comments that he really seems afraid of her rejecting him. And he admits that he is, which makes her say that, of all people, he wants to invite her friend Sunwoo, which would basically be the same as asking her out on a date, and that it would be similar to a confession. And standing up from the bench, she calls him a loser, but says that one day he'll thank her for what she was about to do. After that, she only seemed to be walking away, but in reality, she was heading towards Sunwoo, who happened to be passing by, and tells her that Jin-young seemed to have something to say to her. He was shocked by such a coincidence, but there was nothing he could do. The teacher continues and says that it seemed like Jin Young wanted to invite her to go to the theater this week. Hearing that makes Sunwoo's friend laugh like an idiot and call him a loser for using the teacher to say that, and Sunwoo simply tells her not to be like that. After that, the teacher leaves, but once again asks Sunwoo to go talk to Jin Young afterward. She quickly finds him, and before she approaches him, he once again thinks about the part where the teacher commented that this sounded like a confession. And now, standing in front of him, Sunwoo teasingly asks if he wants to go out with her then. And with nowhere left to run, Jin Young simply says yes, he does. Days later, there he was standing around waiting for Sunwoo, while Jason says that he really managed to invite her to go with him. He still can't believe that Jin Young simply said yes when she asked if he wanted to go out with her. He then asks Jason if he looked good, and Jason says yes, that he looked pretty cool. Suddenly Jason becomes serious and asks what kind of relationship he wants to have with Sunwoo, and says that he needs to make that clear now. Because from what he realized, Jin Young has romantic feelings for Sunwoo, and that with this invitation to go out, Sunwoo must have already realized those feelings too. And for a normal person, that wouldn't be any problem. However, in Jin Young's specific case, he seemed to have an extreme fear of rejection, and that if he continues down this path, he may end up like what happened in his dream. But if he gives up on his feelings now, he may avoid the thing he fears the most from happening. He then says that he doesn't know how to do that, when suddenly he gets an idea. What if he simply starts seeing Sunwoo as a stone girl too, just like all the others? However, to that idea, Jason simply says that if he chooses to see Sunwoo as a stone because of his fear of rejection, he'll give him advice for that. But if he wants to heal from this trauma instead, then as his longtime friend, he'll give everything he has to help him too. That's why he needs to make his choice. This must happen pretty often when one person tells another how they feel and simply gets rejected. The advice Jason gave him was perfect. When someone starts liking another person and those feelings keep growing, it's common for them to become closer to each other. And seeing girls as stones blocked that feeling of wanting to get closer. He has repeated to himself many times that things were fine this way. But he knows better than anyone else that he's simply afraid of being rejected. And in a restaurant, we return to the date with Sunwoo, who says that he looks pretty mature drinking coffee while she drank iced tea. But he only ordered that because it was cheaper. And trying to start a conversation, she says that she has never gone to a theater before and that she was excited. He then starts remembering what Jason said about putting his feelings for Sunwoo aside and starting to see her as a stone, and that by doing so, he could avoid being rejected by her, like what happened in his dream. On the other hand, if he decides to get closer to Sunwoo, he'll have to overcome his trauma. But he wonders if he's really capable of overcoming it. He wonders when it was that he started seeing all girls as stones as a defense mechanism. But bringing him back to reality, Sunwoo asks what he was thinking about. And as an excuse, he says that he noticed the taste of espresso coffee isn't that bad after all. But Sunwoo knows that's a lie and says that he was thinking about something else. And with a crazy look in her eyes, she asks how he dares to think about something else while in front of her. Suddenly, she reveals that she took 2 hours. She spent 2 whole hours getting ready to meet him, putting on makeup and choosing her clothes. Those were hours invested just to meet him. That's why she asks him not to think about anything besides her at that moment. And just like that, he immediately realizes that he already started off wrong. But she says she'll let it slide this time, and then calls him so they can go to the theater because it was already time. With that, he decides to focus completely on her for now, and he'll make his choice later. And now at the theater watching the play, it was simply boring, and it even made Sunwoo fall asleep. After that, they went to a shopping mall, where Jin Young completely failed while trying to win a teddy bear. Then they went to karaoke, where she was surprised because he was truly horrible at singing. And then they went to have dinner at a normal restaurant. It really seemed like a fun day for both of them, and they talked excitedly about it while walking together. They then arrive at the place where each would go their separate way home, and Sunwoo thanks him for walking her home. And still smiling, she asks him to get home safely too. However, she soon notices that he seemed to have something he wanted to say to her. She confronts him about it and says that he seemed really hesitant. She knows exactly how to corner him, and he realizes that he has the perfect opportunity right now. He wanted to say that he would like to go out with her more times like today again. He really wanted to say it, but the words simply won't come out, so Sunwoo calls out to him again. But he only says that he'll see her at school tomorrow. That makes her slap him and say that he should have just said it already if that was all. She then says goodbye and goes on her way. And now alone, he also turns around and was about to leave because even though he knows what he wants to tell her, his fear of rejection is so great that it stops him. And he starts making excuses to himself. That maybe Sunwoo doesn't even want to go out with him again anyway. That maybe if he practices like he did 5 years ago, he can manage to start seeing Sunwoo as just another stone girl too. He needs to do that before they get even closer. That's when he is suddenly called by Sunwoo, who tells him to order something other than espresso next time. And when he turned around to look at her, there she was standing there. And with her usual beautiful expression, she says that he should order something like hot chocolate instead. Suddenly time stops for him, and then Jason asks if he's really going to choose to start seeing Sunwoo as a stone. That he'll respect his choice of always running away from his fears, just like he did 5 years ago. But Jin Young simply asks how he looked at that moment. Jason thinks for a bit, and then tells him the truth. That he asked another person to invite her out for him. That right at the start of the date, he let himself sink into stupid thoughts while she was right in front of him. That she even had to cut his meat for him. And that in the end, he didn't even have the courage to ask her out on another date because he was too scared. And after all that, he still chose to run away from her out of fear of getting closer. And even now, he was thinking about starting to see Sunwoo as a stone. The only thing left was for Jason to say that he looked completely pathetic. But it wasn't necessary, because Jin Young had already realized that himself. And back to reality, Jin Young grabs Sunwoo's hands, and she becomes completely confused, even though she had wanted that. He then apologizes to her, and says that next time he'll take her somewhere more interesting than watching a theater play. And because she fell asleep during it, he apologizes for that too. All of that surprises her, and she ends up genuinely laughing because she had been wondering when he was finally going to say that. Some time passes, and he was still holding her hands, and only afterward does he notice that, but she says it was okay. And then she says that next time she'll expect something more fun. And just like that, they say goodbye in a much more proper way. And while looking at her hand, she couldn't help but show her happiness. The next day, while training pull-ups at a local playground, it's revealed that whenever Jin Young has something stuck in his head, he goes out to exercise. Yesterday, he promised that the next date would be more fun, which means he'll have to overcome his trauma and get closer to Sunwoo. Now Jason praises him for his choice, but Jin Young still wonders how he's going to become closer to Sunwoo. And tired, he asks Jason how many reps he did, and surprisingly, it was only 3. And he asks why every pull-up feels so painful. Suddenly, Sunwoo's friend approaches him, completely scaring him. Her name is Suk-young, but we'll shorten it to Suk. And while she seemed super beautiful and radiant, someone who would hardly be forgotten, to Jin Young, she was only Sunwoo's friend, and he thinks that her stone body actually looked familiar. Suk then asks him to do another pull-up, and when he does, she goes into shock and gives him a flying kick while saying that he was doing everything wrong, and that if he keeps exercising like that, he'll end up full of fractures. Then she says that she's going home to change clothes and asks him to wait there. Without understanding anything, he says that he still needs to finish his workout and calls her a stone. However, now with a threatening expression, she simply says again that she's going to change clothes and that he is to wait there. He wonders what all that was about, but Jason says that this is the perfect opportunity. Jason asks if he remembers the plan they tried to put into practice at the beginning about learning more about Sunwoo through people who already know her. Before, he only wanted to know more about her, but this time his goal is to become closer to her. That's why he should try casually asking Suk about her, and that it should be easier and more reliable to get information from her than from the fat guy. A few minutes later, she returns to the playground, and Jin Young asks if she hadn't said she was going to change clothes, and she says that she already changed, and asks if there's something wrong with his eyesight, because she clearly changed her pants and shoes. And he says that she just looks like a stone to him. And not wanting to waste time, she tells him to try the exercise one more time, because she wants to check his form better. However, before doing that, Jin-young asks if Suk was close to Sunwoo. She says yes, but asks why he mentioned her, though she quickly figures it out herself. It's because he's interested in Sunwoo. Caught completely off guard, he tries to deny it and says that he was just curious. Obviously, she doesn't believe his excuse and says that even a chicken would notice that he's interested in Sunwoo, when suddenly an actual chicken appears there and nods in agreement. But then Suk warns him that winning Sunwoo over won't be easy, and he asks if it's because she's popular. She says yes, that's one of the reasons. But the main reason would be because she's somewhat mysterious. She's usually friendly with everyone at school and very sociable. Suk has already spent hours talking with her about all kinds of things, but even after all that, she simply can't understand what goes on inside her head. No matter how much they joke around and talk, Sunwoo rarely talks about personal things. It's as if she's a person full of secrets. But even so, she's still her closest friend. But anyway, he's going to go through a lot of emotional suffering if he wants to win her over. Hearing that quickly makes him remember that the fat guy had said something similar too, and he wonders what there is about her that he still doesn't know. Suk then tells him to hurry up and do the pull-up already, but he didn't hear her, so she kicks him again. And, curious about why she's acting like this, he asks if she happens to be good at exercising. She says that she must look really weak to him, and he says that she really just looks like a stone. But taking off her hoodie, she says that she may not look like it, but she's very confident when it comes to exercise. And now ready for training. She simply warns him not to end up falling for her. But even at that moment, to him, she looked like nothing more than a stone. And because of that, he simply says that she really does seem fit. And coincidentally, Sunwoo was passing by the park at that exact moment. And upon hearing some excited girls nearby, she quickly covers her face better with her hat and manages to pass by them completely unnoticed. But then she hears other familiar voices, and it was Suk and Jin-young, who couldn't take doing pull-ups anymore. She tells him to do 3 more, but he begs for mercy. She keeps watching them from afar and notices that they seem to be having fun. At least Suk seemed excited because she kicked Jin-young every time he made a mistake. And to show him how it's done, she demonstrates herself and effortlessly pulls herself up with skill and ease. But seeing that, Jin-young simply says that he was doing it exactly like that. Sunwoo then approaches them and says that Suk looks super cool. And upon noticing her, Suk runs over to her extremely happy. With that, Jin-young realizes that Sunwoo always appears out of nowhere. Suk then says that Jin-young was doing the exercise completely wrong, so she was teaching him how to do it properly. Sunwoo then greets him properly and approaches the pull-up bar. She asks how they even do that, because she can't even reach it. That makes Jin-young comment that it's because of her anemia, but she asks if he's making fun of her. Suk then asks if Sunwoo wanted to try doing it too, and if she could help her with it. She agrees, and Suk tells Jin-young to stand in front of her for safety. And while holding her up, Suk tells her to pull herself slowly and without fear, but Sunwoo says that even with Suk holding her, it's still really difficult, and then notices that Jin-young was standing in front of her watching closely. The way he was staring at her starts making her embarrassed, but Suk tells her to hurry up and pull herself up already. And with a lot of effort, she manages to do it, but when she looks at Jin-young again, she loses focus, lets go of the bar, and falls on top of Suk. She asks if Suk was okay, but Suk simply says that she was spacing out while exercising and that Four Eyes wasn't doing his part either. Because of that, now she's furious and is going to destroy both of them. Moments later, while walking home together, Jin-young comments that those exercises really are exhausting, but Sunwoo simply says that she barely did anything, so she doesn't know what he's talking about. However, she says that he should try learning more from Suk, and he says that he'll think about it. But already at the place where they split up, Jin-young says that he'll head off first, but notices that Sunwoo seems like she wants to say something and asks what it is. However, she says it's nothing serious, but asks if he happens to like girls who play sports. But Jin-young simply says that it's good for a person to have a healthy body. Realizing that he didn't even understand her question, she simply smiles like always and says that she was just curious and then leaves. And now alone, he wonders what she meant by that question. Jason appears and says that if there were a list of correct answers to that question, his answer would definitely be wrong. And while walking home, Sunwoo suddenly realizes that the chicken from before had started following her. The next day, for some reason, Suk decided to head to the school late at night and take a walk on a rooftop. It was almost 10 p.m., and aside from her and a few teachers, the campus was completely empty. Then, out of nowhere, she heard someone playing the piano. The moment she wondered, who the hell will be playing the piano at this hour? Chills ran down her spine. Whoever was playing that late at night was unbelievably good. However, anyone expecting the story to take a frightening turn was left disappointed. Jin Young asks why she's even telling them a story like that, and even Jason shivers a little. Suk explains that she'd never heard anyone at the school play the piano that well before. It was an absolutely unbelievable level of talent. The big guy asks if she's seriously pretending not to know who it is, and she says she genuinely has no idea. He then reveals that there's actually a rumor about a ghost haunting the school, the ghost of the music room. According to the rumor, some time ago, there was a girl who would stay in the music room playing the piano late into the night. Then one day she died. Jin Young immediately asks how she suddenly died like that, and the big guy casually explains that she choked on a piece of candy she was eating. Yeah, that was the reason. Ever since that day, whenever night falls, the sound of a piano can supposedly be heard coming from the music room. In other words, the piano Suk heard the previous night was supposedly being played by a ghost. Unfortunately, he had absolutely zero credibility, and everyone thought the story was ridiculous. Then Jin Young glances to the side and notices that Sunwoo actually looks terrified. He realizes she's even more timid than he thought if a silly ghost story is enough to make her shake like that. Just then, someone calls out to Jin Young and Sunwoo from behind. When they turn around, it's only their teacher. She says it's perfect that she found them there and asks them to come with her if they aren't busy. They agree, leaving only Suk and the big guy behind. Suk takes the opportunity to ask whether that ghost story is actually true since she'd never heard it before. Without the slightest hint of shame, the big guy admits it was obviously a lie. He made the whole thing up just to scare Jin Young and Sunwoo. As he turns to leave, he laughs and says that seeing how scared Sunwoo looked was more than enough to satisfy him. Listening to all of that, Suk is left speechless, though she still can't help calling him a crazy fat idiot. Later that night, Jin Young and Sunwoo are still walking through the school, while Jin Young complains that helping the teacher took way longer than expected. That's when he notices something seems off about Sunwoo and asks if she's alright, because she doesn't look well at all. She insists she's fine, but she doesn't sound convincing, not even to herself. Because of that, Jin Young asks if she's actually scared because of the ghost story the big guy told earlier. In response, she lightly smacks him on the shoulder and insists that's not it. Ghosts don't exist, and she's not scared at all. A ghost dying after choking on candy isn't scary in the slightest. The problem is that she says all of that while trembling uncontrollably. Then, all of a sudden, both of them hear someone playing the piano, just like in the story. Even Jin Young, who didn't believe in ghosts, can't help but get nervous. The music is coming from the music room, exactly like the rumor claimed, making Sunwoo genuinely wonder if it really is a ghost playing. Jin Young insists that's impossible and says it's probably just another student. But before he can finish that thought, a strange figure with glowing eyes suddenly appears right in front of them. Still trying to stay calm, Jin Young wonders if there really are students still at school this late. He looks over at Sunwoo to ask if she's alright, but he doesn't even need an answer. To make matters worse, the supposed ghost starts walking toward them. Sunwoo completely loses it and bolts, screaming that the ghost who died choking on candy is coming after them. Jin Young tries asking where she's running to, but she isn't listening anymore. She's simply screaming for help as she runs for her life. Left standing there, the supposed ghost is completely dumbfounded because it was just their teacher. She has absolutely no idea why they suddenly ran away or what all this ghost nonsense is about. Still, being mistaken for a ghost doesn't do her self-esteem any favors. Now she's left wondering if she really looks that much like one. A few moments later, Jin Young is still chasing after Sunwoo, who refuses to stop running. Eventually, he finds her lying on the school's rooftop. He asks what happened, but the only word she can manage to say is stairs. For a moment, she'd completely forgotten about her anemia, and now she was completely exhausted. After catching her breath and calming down a little, she stands back up and asks what that dark figure they saw actually was. Jin Young replies that it was probably just a person, although it certainly looked strange in the darkness. While Jin Young blames the big guy for telling them that ridiculous ghost story. The piano suddenly starts playing again. Sunwoo immediately freezes, and Jin-young begins seriously wondering what all of this could possibly be. She was genuinely terrified, so he needed to calm her down somehow. That's when Jason jumps in and tells him this is the perfect opportunity. Jin-young has no idea what she's talking about, so Jason explains that this is his chance to get closer to Sunwoo. Right now, she's just a girl trembling in fear. However, before Jin-young can make a move, Sunwoo steps closer to him herself. Still shaking, she quietly admits that everything happening is really scary. This was the golden opportunity for both of them. At that moment, Jin-young remembers hearing about this kind of situation before. It's a psychological phenomenon where people begin developing feelings for someone because they're sharing a dangerous or frightening experience together. But while he's thinking about that, the music played by the supposed ghost gradually becomes brighter and more cheerful. As a result, Sunwoo slowly relaxes, no longer looking nearly as frightened. Before long, the two of them burst into laughter, joking that this ghost is actually an incredible pianist. Now that she's calmed down, Sunwoo quickly recognizes the piece the supposed ghost is playing. Curious, Jin-young asks how she knows it. She reveals that when she was little, she used to take dance lessons. She's known the big guy ever since kindergarten, and one time they were paired together as dance partners. She remembers the two of them getting into an argument that day, although she's pretty sure he was the one who started it. Jin-young asks whether she kept taking dance lessons afterward. She shakes her head and says she switched to art classes instead, but eventually had to deal with various problems because of her anemia. Still, she says that's beside the point. The big guy was genuinely an amazing dancer. He was probably a prodigy. Jin-young can't help imagining someone with that physique dancing and honestly wonders if it's even possible. Even so, he accepts it and comments that it sounds like it must have been fun. Sunwoo agrees, but admits she doesn't remember much from her kindergarten days. Then, all of a sudden, she says that since the ghost is already playing the piano for them, she reaches out and asks for his hand. Jin-young doesn't understand why, but he takes it anyway. With their hands joined, Sunwoo begins leading him through a dance. One step at a time, that was the plan. Unfortunately, Jin-young immediately steps on her foot by accident. The pain even reminds her of the kick Suk gave her before, making her realize she still hasn't fully recovered. Even so, she isn't discouraged. She simply asks for his hand again so they can try one more time. This time, she attempts a spinning step with him. It doesn't exactly go according to plan. Jin-young trips over his own feet and falls flat on his face. Sunwoo can't help laughing and tells him he's unbelievably bad at dancing. Still, she never meant to embarrass him, so she asks if he'd like to give it another try. He happily agrees. This time, however, she warns him that if he steps on her foot again, she'll stomp on his too. Taking it much more seriously now, Jin-young gets back to his feet. Then, instead of simply standing up, he dramatically offers her his hand like they were at a formal ballroom dance. The gesture catches her completely off guard, but it also makes her smile. She accepts. Once again, it's hard not to see it as a parallel to a possible confession somewhere in the future. Maybe. Both of them realize exactly how romantic the situation looks and can't help feeling embarrassed. In the end, the mysterious piano that played every night without anyone knowing why eventually became known as a ghost story. But for others, it became a gift. A few minutes later, as they're leaving the school together, Jin-young asks Sunwoo whether she still draws. She answers that she does. Hearing that, he suddenly has a strange request. He asks if she can draw a muscular man with a mustache, promising he'll pay her for it. Unfortunately, she says she isn't very good at drawing people, though she'll still give it a try. Just like that, Jin-young learns another little detail about Sunwoo. It also makes him wonder if maybe he should find a hobby of his own. Then, all of a sudden, Sunwoo says she needs to use the school's restroom. After everything that's happened, Jin-young asks whether she'll really be okay going by herself. Looking as though she's already forgotten everything that happened earlier, she asks what he's talking about. She assures him she'll be fine and says she'll be right back. Jin-young, refusing to be just another hopeless beta, starts thinking things over. A little while ago, she looked absolutely terrified. So why is she suddenly walking around the school by herself without a care? In the end, Beta Jin-young concludes that maybe she's simply used to being scared, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But Chad Jason has a different theory. Maybe Sunwoo staged the whole thing from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Sunwoo calmly fixes her makeup in the restroom, looking completely unconcerned. After she's finished, she lets out a smug little laugh and remarks that ghosts don't even exist. Although, as payment for all the acting she had to do, the spot where Jin Young stepped on her foot still hurts. Can we officially say she's ready to take Aizen's place in Bleach? Meanwhile, in the music room, the teacher asks whether the pianist is finally finished, pointing out that it's getting very late. The name of the mysterious pianist is Yojin. Still seated at the piano, she lets out a deep sigh and quietly asks if she can play just one more song. Unfortunately, she speaks so softly that the teacher can't even hear what she says. Leaving that aside, the mysterious ghost's night finally comes to an end, and the two of them head home. Sunwoo is friendly with everyone at school, but she never truly gets close to anyone. And there's a reason for that. Back in class 2 to 5, Sunwoo sits quietly, lost in thought. The thing occupying her mind is Jin Young's strange request. It was far too vague, so she decides she'll go ask him for more details. Just then, someone calls out to her. Two girls from her class approach Sunwoo and ask if she has a minute. After thinking for several long seconds, Sunwoo finally remembers their names and asks what they need. One of them then shows her phone screen. On it is a paused video in which Sunwoo can clearly be seen in the background. The girl explains that Sunwoo accidentally appeared in one of the videos on her channel, and the video completely blew up. Ever since then, people have been constantly asking for Sunwoo to appear again. Everyone keeps asking if the two of them are friends, and they've also been saying how unbelievably pretty she is. One point for the viewers. They definitely have great taste in women. Feeling a little embarrassed, Sunwoo asks if the girl has become an influencer. She smiles and says it's something like that. Getting straight to the point, she asks Sunwoo to appear in more of her vlogs, promising that once the channel starts making money, she'll pay her well. Although she seems hesitant, Sunwoo accepts with a smile. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Jason is once again explaining today's mission to Jin Young. His objective is simple. Invite Sunwoo to go to the school store with him. Basically, a mini date. Thinking his real intentions might be way too obvious, Jin Young asks Jason if that would actually work. Jason tells him that whether it's obvious or not doesn't matter anymore. He's already decided that he's going to get closer to Sunwoo no matter what. He should just treat it like clearing another stage in a game. Gathering his courage, Jin Young tells himself he's already made up his mind. Now all he needs is the nerve to follow through. Still nervous, he walks into Sunwoo's classroom and looks around for her. Soon, he hears people talking near the back of the room. There are Sunwoo and the two girls, seemingly introducing her to the audience while recording another video. Realizing they're busy filming, Jin Young quietly decides to leave and come back later. Sunwoo notices him standing there, but she doesn't say anything either. After all, he never even worked up the courage to talk to her. As it turns out, inviting Sunwoo to the school store proves far more difficult than expected. She spent the entire day busy with the influencer girls. Once classes are finally over, Jin Young gives up and decides to head home. As he walks, he complains to himself that Sunwoo really is incredibly popular. He had no idea she'd so many close friends. Then, someone suddenly calls out to him. Turning around, he finds the beautiful Sunwoo smiling at him. She asks if he was talking to himself again. The question instantly catches him off guard. He hurriedly denies it, while Sunwoo simply laughs. Giving him her usual light pat on the shoulder, she says that every time she runs into him, he's talking to himself. She jokingly asks if he's chatting with an imaginary friend. Leaving that aside, she was about to bring up today's bus ride. But Jin Young quickly interrupts and asks if she'd like to walk with him instead. She immediately agrees. Unfortunately, before they can leave, someone suddenly calls Sunwoo's name. The same two girls from earlier have found her again. She greets them as usual, and they ask if she's busy. Only then do they notice she's with Jin Young. One of the girls awkwardly remarks that maybe they should read the room. With that, she decides not to interrupt. Before leaving, though, she reminds Sunwoo that she needs to film with them tomorrow. As the two girls walk away, one quietly wonders if they're asking too much of Sunwoo. The other admits they probably are, but says it'll be fine. After all, Sunwoo is so kind that she'll always do whatever they ask. Hearing those words stirs something inside Sunwoo. Eventually, the girls are far enough away that their voices can no longer be heard. Jin Young finds himself wondering whether they really are Sunwoo's close friends. The truth is, he knows almost nothing about her friendships. Then he remembers Suk mentioning that Sunwoo seems to become friend with everyone. But when he turns toward her, he sees an expression of pure despair on her face. Why was she making that face? He has absolutely no idea. The expression lasts only a moment. Soon enough, Sunwoo is smiling again, calling Jin Young an idiot like always. She explains that she forgot she'd already recharged her bus card today, so she needs to head to the bus stop right away, and he doesn't have to worry about walking her home. With that, she simply leaves. But the uneasy feeling doesn't. Something feels terribly wrong. The expression she made reminds Jin Young of what the big guy once told him. That feeling that there was something missing inside Sunwoo. Now he wonders if that's exactly what the big guy meant. Jason agrees. He says the expression on her face was genuinely worrying. Then she practically ran away from the situation. He asks whether Jin Young plans to do something about it. Determined to learn more about Sunwoo, Jin Young answers that he does. Jason congratulates him and immediately gives him his next mission. Later that night, Jin Young waits alone in a park. He's waiting for the person who seems to know Sunwoo better than anyone else. Before long, she arrives. The first thing Suk asks is why he called her out to the park so late at night. Then, jumping to her own conclusions, she reminds him that she'd already warned him not to fall for Sunwoo. And honestly, can you really blame him? She's incredibly easy to fall for. And that's where we'll stop for today. As of this video's release, there are still 5 more chapters left to cover. So if you enjoyed this recap and want to see the continuation, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment to help support the channel. See you in the next one.